This interview is made possible by the work of the Diocese of Arlington's Office of Communications, which is funded in part by the Bishop's Lenten Appeal. We thank all who support this critical appeal and the ministries it funds. You're listening to Searching for More, a podcast of the Diocese of Arlington. Religious freedom is a cherished right, and yet it is constantly challenged. Today, hear from the executive director of a Washington D.C. nonprofit law firm whose only focus is protecting religious freedom. From the Little Sisters of the Poor to the Hobby Lobby case, what she says you can do to defend your religious freedom.
We want people to talk about this issue. It's not a fringe issue.
Your host is Angela Pellerano, Director of Media Relations for the Diocese.
Montse, thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Definitely. Well, listen, before we dig into some of the specific religious liberty issues in our country, can you define religious liberty for us?
That is a great question. Religious liberty is a human right. It is the right to believe whatever it is that your conscience tells you to, and to live out that belief in your daily life. And it's a right that is not given to us by the government, but given to us because of our inherent human dignity. And the Becket Fund defends that right for people of faith, people of no faith, and all types of faiths.
And how well are we doing in Virginia? Are there local and or state issues that we should be aware of?
So Virginia is very much like the rest of the country in that the Supreme Court precedents and rulings, as well as local rulings, affect it. There's nothing right now in your backyard that we are particularly working on, but the masterpiece ruling that we had on Monday definitely is something that can be applied should there be an issue in your backyard.
You know, it seems that every day all over the country our religious liberties threatened in one way or another. And again, most recently, the one you just brought up, a Christian cake baker in Colorado who refused to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex couple won his case in the Supreme Court. It's being heralded a win for religious freedom. What are your thoughts on this case?
It definitely is a win. So this wonderful individual cake baker who decided that he wanted to live his faith in his business, through his business, which people do all the time. I mean, Chipotle and a couple of other businesses don't use certain products, so they don't buy from certain people because they're taking a moral stance on one issue or another. It's something that happens all the time in businesses, particularly businesses that are closely held, like Jack, who owns his own business. And this is important because the court said two things. One, that religious liberty is important, and two, that religious animus, so bigotry against religious people, is bad, and it's unconstitutional, and it's discrimination. That is really important for all of us to understand, and it's really important for people of faith to know that our Constitution protects them and their right to live out their faith, even when we're talking about difficult questions like LGBT rights, and particularly participating in a religious ceremony that you don't agree with, which is exactly what happened with Jack.
After the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of that cake baker in the same-sex wedding case, do you think it will have any bearing on the Orleans Flowers case or any other religious liberty cases for that matter? And of course, we're talking about the Flowers case, which involves an owner who refused to provide flowers for a same-sex wedding and cited her religious beliefs as the reason why.
So the cake case, which is about providing a cake for a ceremony, right? And also the government forcing you to say something or take a particular position on an issue. That's what was happening with Jack. This is a little bit different, but also more involved when you're talking about the florist. It is artistic expression in that she is using her God-given talents to be able to create something beautiful for a religious ceremony. But if you think about the role of a florist in a wedding, they are with you the day of the event, creating this environment where this ceremony is going to take place and walking with you on it, fixing the boutonniere on the groom. They are a part of this ceremony. And this case and this ruling definitely affects her case, but it's up to the Supreme Court to decide whether they're going to tell the lower court to go back and use this ruling or actually take it up and listen to it. And we'll know in the next couple of days what it is that they decide to do. But it's a clear signal that people have religious liberty in this country and that they are being discriminated against because of their beliefs on marriage.
You know, some say freedom of religion is being used as freedom to discriminate. How do we fight against that premise?
It's great that the Supreme Court decided to call this issue discrimination as well. So a lot of people say that you don't have the freedom to discriminate in this country. Well, that goes both ways. You don't have the right to discriminate against people who are religious because of their beliefs. And that's exactly what the Colorado Commission was doing to Jack in the cake baker case. And it's what's happening around the country when people of goodwill disagree on these important issues. And discrimination, like I said, it goes both ways,
Right.
and it shouldn't be happening in either of the instances. So religious people and LGBT people are being given this false choice where you have to choose one or the other. You don't. We live in a society where we can tolerate differing viewpoints and coexist in a friendly way.
Religious Freedom Week is later this month. As a Catholic, you're aware of that. From June 22nd to June 29th, Catholics across the country are encouraged to pray, reflect, and act in support of religious liberty at home and abroad. Does the Becket Fund have any plans to promote this? And also, what would you encourage people to do with regard to the ACT component of Religious Freedom Week?
Becket is definitely going to participate in Religious Freedom Week. It's what we do. We're a nonprofit law firm that defends religious liberty all over the country, and it's all we do. Religious liberty all the time for people of all faiths and no faith at all. And we want to carry that message to Catholics in particular because our founding document and founding kind of intellectual grounding is Dignitatis Humanae, the Second Vatican Council's declaration on religious liberty and how religious liberty is tied to human dignity. Our Catholic understanding of that principle and how important that right is what allows us to continue to fight for these rights in court and gives us that grounding. So we definitely want to participate. We want to bring light to that fundamental teaching from our church. Even though Becket isn't Catholic, our founder is Catholic, and we are named after a Catholic saint. So there's a lot of roots there associated with this. And on the action item piece, I would say that we want people to talk about this issue. It's not a fringe issue. So take this week to just think about it, reflect on it, see what you know and what you don't know. Have a conversation with a neighbor about religious liberty and why it's important, and engage in it so that if someone asks you or you see something in the news, you understand what the issue is and why we have to defend it. And
where can people learn more about you and the Becket Fund?
We have a wonderful website that's a resource, becketlaw.org, BECKET. 1T, law.org, and it's a wonderful resource on our cases, but also on just that it describes these principles and how they are protected by our Constitution.
Montse, thank you for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Searching for More. If you enjoyed this podcast, please write a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Also, make sure you follow the Diocese and the Arlington Catholic Herald on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And subscribe to our YouTube channels for regular videos that will inspire, educate, and inform you about the Catholic faith and our diocesan community.